Jason and Nadja, how are you guys doing? It's been some time.
Fantastic.
Good to be here. Good to chat with you.
Thank you so much for taking the time. So before we jump in and you guys give us a little bit of background on who you are, etc., tell us a little bit as to sort of why anyone listening to this video should dedicate the next 30 minutes to doing so, and what can they expect?
Yeah, so to introduce ourselves, we're co-founders at Adlunum, a Web3 investment platform. We've both been in the space for many, many years in different capacities, really care about the technology, really care about the industry. And I think really, just to answer your question about why we are here and why we are talking about this and why this is worth listening to is if you care about the future of this industry, it's extremely important to understand that as much as there are a lot of questionable practices, some of these practices are so questionable that it has to be outed. It has to be out there, because if we're talking about retail investors investing into NFTs, for example, we need to know how much of the market is actually real trading and how much of the market is complete eye blindery, to the point where you have to question what actually is real at all.
And that, I would say, is one of the most pertinent issues in the industry, right? You need to look at everything with 6 different lenses to see if it makes sense. So, and if it's one thing I know is that it takes a lot of guts to be able to call bullshit on a project out there. So, especially if it's got some kind of scale. But the reality is that that's just very often the case. Usually, the bigger they are, the more full of shit they are. FTX taught us that. The NFT boom taught us that. And then if we didn't learn that after the ICO, from the ICO days, I don't know what the hell we're doing. But I'll let Vui sort of dive into the issue, or rather, what is your connection to the industry? Like you mentioned, you've been involved in Web3 for some time. Can you sort of like expand on that a little bit?
I started in the industry in 2017, worked as a journalist for publications like Bitcoin.com, Investing.com, Being Crypto, and many others. I come from a marketing background. I was a pharma marketing executive before this. So then started a communications agency. I was working in the industry in the wild ICO days of like 2017, 2018. So definitely saw and experienced a lot there. And as a result of that, and also working as a fractional CMO for different companies, Jason and I had been working together. I think that was like 2017, actually, when we started working together. At some point, we then came together and said, look, there's a lot of problems in this industry. How are we going to address some of them? And so launchpads at the time were quite new. And so we started Adlunum as a launchpad, which has grown into more of a Web3 investment ecosystem, really supporting startups, from early stage all the way to the public funding round. Also, just for myself, so I host a podcast called Future of NFTs every week, where I talk about the future of NFTs. So the technology, as I said earlier, and where it's going is personally incredibly important to me, because I'm here because I believe in it. Over to you.
Yeah, sure. Just to add also, Nadja is also Unstoppable's most inspiring women of Web3 2023. She's actually one of the people that recently won that award. So we actually really like Unstoppable domains. I actually have quite a few. I have NFT pretty much every NFT domain, with the exception of NFT.NFT and NFT.X. Every Web3 NFT domain. So very, very much invested in the ecosystem, in the Web3 ecosystem, spent significant amounts of funds buying Unstoppable domains, probably 20-30K over a couple week period.
And background about yourself.
Yeah, just some background. My area is sort of investments. Spend a lot of time at investments over at NFT Technologies, sort of determining like what went into our portfolio. I spent a lot of time dealing with looking at multiple different projects that were pitching and trying to understand kind of what made them special and what sort of determined success, right? And of course, brought some of those skills to Adlunum, which is our launchpad. But that said, it's sort of an investment background. But yeah, so it sort of came in from there and looked at what Unstoppable Domains was doing and decided kind of that they were a good place to sort of invest some, especially in Web3 domains.
So before we jump into the whole Unstoppable domain story and stuff, I'd like to just want to sort of preface this with the fact that Jason, we've known each other since the Blocks Live days, since the 2017 days. So you've seen, we both, you know, seen things from a sort of particular set of lenses. And Nadja spent some time working with Roger Ver. So if you can sort of stomach Roger for a long enough period of time, then, you know, by definition, you cannot be a pansy. There's no way, shape, or form, because that's a one hard guy to deal with. Like, we've interviewed him once or twice. He's a particular character. So it's important to note that from the get-go, that whatever it is we're going to be discussing now comes from people that, you know, just aren't trying to you know, blow smoke when there's no fire. If you guys weren't really serious about this, then there'd be no way we're having this conversation, because you're both two very smart people, and you have many better things to do than this, I'm sure. So let's with that, let's dive into the story. I'll give you the floor and tell me what it is we're going to be talking about.
So sure, get started. But yeah, but you're right. We've known each other since Blocks Live television, when we were sort of used to be on the show together, comment on crypto way back in 2019, 2018. But yeah, I think this story sort of begins is we were bidding on an auction called tokens for a domain called tokens.x. So hosted on the Rarible platform. The seller was Unstoppable Domains, right? So essentially what we were looking at doing was purchasing this domain for pretty much our own purposes, for ad lunam as a company, right?
Okay, and 1 second, and because let's assume that nobody in the audience knows any of this. So you were buying from a website called TokenX, and TokenX is a website that does.
No, not at all. We were buying the domain tokens.x on the Rarible platform. We were on rarible.com purchasing tokens.x, which was an auction that was placed by Unstoppable Domains. So Unstoppable Domains, they have obviously several premium domains that they were holding at auction. So that includes tokens.x, like cruise.x, flying.x, this dating.nft, cameras.x. So several essentially premium domains that they had identified, 20 of them that they identified that they put up for sale on Rarible. One of them was tokens.x. We were purchasing tokens.x to launch for ad lunam for our company.
So this was a 48-hour auction that was happening for these, I think it was actually 21 domains. So 48-hour auction, no reserve for these particular 21 domains. And tokens.x was one of them.
So in theory, on a 48-hour auction, it only goes for 48 hours. Whoever's the highest bidder at the end of the 48 hours wins the domain, generally speaking. The one exception is that if somebody bids within the last, let's say, a few minutes of the auction,
it rolls over.
Yeah, so it extends for like a period of overtime for 10 minutes. So for
specifically
example,
10 minutes.
Exactly 10 minutes. Like that's the amount. So for example, if somebody bids, let's say the auction is supposed to end at 4 p.m., somebody bids at 3:59. Now the auction is instead 4:09 unless somebody bids at 4:08.
And it can keep going on for 4 days actually.
Exactly. But as long as there's a bid and nobody bids within 10 minutes, then that's the last bid and that's the person that wins, right? So in our case, we were bidding, got to the point where, I placed a bid. I was the highest bidder. We watched the countdown go from 10 minutes to 0 with nobody else bidding. So we were watching it in real time. We saw me as listed as the highest bidder. We hit refresh multiple times. And then not only that, but it said, you have won the auction. So the screen changed. It said you won the auction. It said waiting to transfer the domain from seller. And then we scrolled up and we saw the seller was Unstoppable Domains. So we said, okay, fine. They're moving the domain to us. And it showed us very clearly that I was the highest bidder. And so we were celebrating, right? Now, 5 minutes later, the auction, when we check it, expecting that the domain is transferred, and now we have it, we notice that the auction is back on and somebody else is the highest bidder. Now,
so keep in mind, more than 10 minutes have now passed, and the rules state that it can only be up to 10 minutes. So a bid at the 11th minute would not qualify whatsoever.
And the auction closed anyway. Like, did you receive some kind of email confirmation with that the auction is closed? You've won this domain.
Yeah, we actually didn't, but we saw the screen change. And keep in mind, there are timestamps, so you can actually see the time that I made my bid, and you can see the time when the subsequent bid is, and there's a 15-minute gap between
But
mine.
Do you have
and
any
the
proof of this? Did you take
Yeah, it's on
screenshots,
screen.
videos?
Yeah, no, it's on the website right now, so I can send you the link. You can, it's live. We can
All
do it.
right, okay.
Live. So it's currently available. So essentially, you can see right now. You can see like I placed a bid. I was the last valid bid at that point, and then a whole 15 minutes goes by, and then there's suddenly another person who places a bid, and he gets it. So after 10 minutes, I'd actually won it, and this is what we actually saw. I'd won the domain, but then somehow somebody placed a bid 5 minutes later, which means 15 minutes from the last bid. So now again, there's no way really that this should have been able to happen.
So there are two rules of the auction that are really significant. The first one is just 10 minutes. The second rule is that the new bid that replaces the old bid has to be an increment of at least 5% higher the value than the previous bid.
Sure.
So not only is the bid subsequent to ours, which who knows how it was possible for this bid to happen since the auction had been closed, but the new value is also less than 5%. It's only a tenth of the 5% that it's supposed to have increased by.
Right. So essentially what happened was like my bid was too wet, and it shows me as the highest bidder on the page. Again, this is well documented by articles, screenshots, or multiple other sources. And essentially what happened was somebody was able to place a bid 5 minutes after the auction closed. Not only were they able to place a bid 5 minutes after the auction closed, but it was for an amount that was like about 10% the minimum allowable bid. So for example, at my too wet bid, the minimum next bid should have been 2.1. This person bid 2.01.
I've understood.
So not only was it over 15 minutes, basically over the time, but it was also for an amount much less. So this seemed to us to be very, very strange, because how could somebody, unless you have access to the platform and you're controlling the platform, be able to basically bid at a point where no normal person should be able to bid, and for an amount much lower than this platform is supposed to allow you to bid. And by the way, Match Systems, maybe you've heard of Match Systems. Match Systems is a blockchain security firm, one of the top blockchain security firms in the world. They were actually recommended to us by Hackin.
And their work is regularly quoted by Cointelegraph, for example, as being an industry leader when it comes to investigating crime,
cybersecurity, and asset recovery and things like that, right? So Match Systems had a look at this data, and they've actually published a LinkedIn post that they say essentially that there were irregularities in this auction, and actually they point out that the next bid was over 5 minutes after the auction ended, and also that the bid was for lower than the minimum amount that should have been allowed. Now, the only way that I can interpret that, although they've said very clearly somebody was able to place a bid past the auction time and for a number lower than they should have been able to bid. Now, the only way I'm able to understand that is that somebody has access to the Rarible platform. That's a minimum. That's the only thing I can understand from that, because there's no normal person who can have access to that. It's either that or they maybe got hacked. I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to speculate. But the only explanation I have is that somebody is controlling from their side the ability to place a bid and the ability to decide how much that bid is.
Okay, so let me ask some questions just as a because as far as NFT art goes, I spend almost no time on it just because it's not an area of interest. But when it comes to security, this part is very, very interesting. So let me just ask some sort of dumb questions here. So is Rarible a private company, or is it a DAO?
As far as I know, it's a private company,
but
they do have a token. They have
an actively traded token.
The RARI token.
RA?
RI.
Yeah, Rari.
RI token. Okay, I'll check that on CMC. And in the meantime, do we know if they state that all of their auctions are on-chain processes?
That's a good question. I don't know whether they've given much clarity on exactly how their system works, but yeah, I mean, you can go to their website for the auction. I can share with you in the chat, certainly, and you can see that currently. You can see the timestamps because they're timestamps for each bid. You can see the time and each bid, basically.
To put it this way, if nothing else, participating in this auction and these things coming to light have raised more questions about how their platform actually works than the answers available out there.
So this is actually key, right? Like, it's not about what happened to us. This is actually absolutely not what it's about at all. We will get a resolution one way or the other. What this means really is, if you extrapolate from this, essentially, if Rarible has access to the platform, or this is happening on Rarible's platform somehow, somebody there has control over this. Now, the question obviously becomes, and by the way, they've put out, they said that they've done an investigation and
found no wrongdoing.
Found no wrongdoing, and that they will be working on the system to improve it, right? But the question really is that how many auctions did this affect? How long has it been going on? What is a percentage of amounts that, of fraudulent auctions, or it's at least auctions where the numbers are not correlating? The other thing is, then, by the way, this is extremely important, is volume of NFT trading, right? So, for example, when we've looked, so the thing is, this was just a start. Like, as soon as I noticed with the way this behaved, I immediately sent a letter to Rarible support where I asked for the server logs, which they have not provided, by the way. I asked very specifically for the server logs. I said, I watched this auction go down to zero. I watched myself win. And I actually sent this message to them, and it's all timestamped and everything. This is even before we went public with the story. I immediately messaged them. I described what I saw. And essentially, they've not provided, like I said, server logs. And essentially what this tells us is how many times has this happened? There's no clarity about that. Like, how many, so we know, for example, that we started looking at the other auctions. So all the other auctions, and we found irregularities literally with every auction that we looked at.
But when we say irregularities, it's not, okay, there's this one irregularity that happens all across. There are so many different types of irregularities. Sometimes they even cancel each other out. It is, if you talk about going down the rabbit hole and going into a different plane of existence when it comes to trying to understand this stuff, like, it's literally brain breaking to look at all of this data and go, like, how the hell are you supposed to make sense of X, Y, Z? It's insane.
It's so painful. It's so painful because there's so many different disciplines that you need to understand, at least at a high level, to be able to make sense of everything. So,
but also, like, sometimes, we can get into kind of some of the explanations that were given by Unstoppable Domains or by Rarible as a response to, our going public. But sometimes, I'll let you. I'll let you add now. So sometimes the explanation would be A, but then you look at some of the domains, and A is not possible because it's actually B. And then sometimes they give explanation B, but it's D. It's insane.
So basically, from what we've been able to research, in some cases, the domain was given to the highest bidder. In some cases, regardless of whether he's the latest bidder or not, in some cases, it was given to the latest bidder and not necessarily the highest bidder. In some cases, it was given to some bidder, which could have been like maybe 8, 9, 10 bids down, like randomly, like almost like they picked a big bidder at random. And in some cases, we found they've actually given the domain to somebody who wasn't even bidding on the auction.
So we've learned a lot of things about how auctions work that we never understood before.
So, I mean, you think about this, right? Okay. Let's say, for example, Pepsi said that, hey, we're going to hold a competition and the winner gets $1 million. And then you find out that the person who is like winning the $1 million didn't even enter the auction. Didn't even enter the competition. So, I mean, that's like, hold on a second. Are they just giving these domains to whoever they want and then just covering it up and making it seem like it's an auction?
But what I'm more shocked by is just how I'm not phased by this, like not phased at all. It's like it's almost expected. It's kind of sad in a way. It's really, really sad. Like I think it points out something that's fundamentally wrong with our industry, and
I actually have a thought about that. We tend to sort of be very jaded and say, oh, this is almost expected. But I don't think that we really take this to its intellectual conclusion, right? If you consider, like I was saying, what we've done is we've actually counted, we've listed up usernames that we believe are suspect, and then we've cross-referenced it with each particular auction. And we found that a good 70% in some cases, one of the auctions we looked at was 76% of the bids are absolutely the exact same people, right? The exact
Oh,
seven.
snap.
And really, really questionable activity, questionable engagement. So if you eliminate this list of people from the entire auction, you're actually left with a fraction of the ultimate value of the ultimate activity
Actually,
on the
there's two
auction.
things. There's actually two points,
Exactly.
right? One is what you have, you're left with much less trades, less actual transactions, right? So for example, if Rarible, like as one of their metrics, counts transaction volume, well, if out of 100 bids on, let's say, tokens.x, only 70% or 60 or 70 or 76% of them turn out to be fake bids, that means the volume is really only 25% or 30% what it's actually being reported on, right? At the very minimum.
That's the problem, not only in the specifically with Rarible, but I mean like the industry as a whole. I think Binance had this problem recently when their trading dropped by 50% when they made KYC mandatory. You know what I mean?
But there's another element to this that makes it actually more insidious, right? It's not just about multiple trades. It's also the fact that like they're at the other end of this as well, right? So for example, they're doing multiple of these trades are happening, but at the end, the person who's winning it is essentially essentially one of these suspects, right? Not only that, but keep in mind, like if you remove all these fraudulent bids, then the item only goes for like $100. So there's actually $200. So there's actually real financial costs when you have essentially somebody bidding a price up and they're all fake people, right?
Of course.
Just to clarify here is if you go to the Unstoppable Domains website and you buy a particular domain, you're going to pay, in some cases, a few $1,000s for X domain. But then on the auction, if you remove all of these fake trades, the ultimate value of the live auction is then only like $100-200, which is huge difference from a few $1,000s.
So what that tells you is essentially it's in both companies' interest, really, to make it seem like that the price of these tokens or these NFTs are much higher. Because again, like I said, you have to remove all the inactive, you have to remove all the suspect bids, and then not only are you lose a lot of volume that you're referring to as oh, this is actual volume, but it's also the actual cost of the net cost that you're getting out of these auctions is now much less, right?
Absolutely.
So you might say, you might consider the first thing, you might describe that as, let's say, wash trading, which in and of itself is bad. But the other part is that the fact that the price going up is actually costing real people to spend money. So if I see it and I'm like, oh, the cost is 1,200, I don't know that the last 5 bids have been fake. I'll buy bid 1,300. So like you can't even give the say, okay, I'm going to take these bids out and then give it to this particular person, because you don't know what he would have bid had the actual bids not been there. He may have not bid 1,300. He would have bid like something like 200 because the earlier bid was 200.
Exactly. It's like artificially inflating the value for absolutely no reason, right? So
but the reason of making money is that's what the other thing is, right? So somebody's actually
scamming. It's scamming, right? What it is like.
So if you follow the logic through, right? Like if you go to step 1, essentially we even my system has verified that the system behaved in an unusual way. In my case, at the very minimum, we know that the system allowed people to bid past the auction. They were allowed to bid at an amount lower than that. Now there's a question about, for example, how the system was allowed to do that, whether that was somebody enabling the system to do that or how exactly that happened. But let's leave that question aside for a second. If you assume that that's able to be happen in this case, then you extrapolate that with all the other volume. We know now on Rarible, which happens to be one of the largest NFT platforms in the world, that almost 70% of the trading there was fake. Now you extrapolate that to the entire industry. Why should people care? Well, guess what? We make a living and talking about NFTs and the NFT industry. And guess what? It matters if it's only 20% of what we think. It really matters.
Of course it matters. Look, you're speaking to someone just to sort of put things into perspective, right? Like just to sort of like, this is what I do for fun, okay? I think the Decentraland and Sandbox are full of crap, right? Because the actual user base there is almost zero. It's negligible. It's pointless. And with the same sort of reasoning stick, I guess. I've been quite vocal about how useless the NFT art world is, because essentially it exists almost entirely to launder money, right? But that's maybe a discussion for a different time. But let's just sort of make the audience aware of something, because I'm sure you are both aware that when you list your own token at an exchange, some exchanges are legit, usually the regulated ones, right? And they say, okay, yes, come, we'll listen. Other exchanges go, hey, buddy, do you want 200K a day of fake volume? Right? I got the fake volume for you. It's how, that's just how the industry works, right?
Right,
So,
but there's a difference, right? You know what the difference is? I'll tell you the difference with that.
I'm not saying it's right, to be fair. I'm not saying it's right, just to be clear.
No. Agreed, but I'll tell you what the difference is, right? When you're talking about, let's say, for example, market making, right? Somebody has to actually put up the money for that market making. And essentially, if they bet wrong and they're not able to move the market at a sufficiently, high enough price, essentially people use that price to sell against them. That cannot happen in an auction. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
That doesn't happen. In this situation, only you win. You can only win. You can't lose.
Yeah, so it's a much more
token is only going up, and not only that, but they're the ones who are profiting at the end, whoever this person is.
So it's a much more lucrative scam, is what you're saying.
And not only that, but market making, like they're taking a risk for whatever you want to, like however you want. They're taking a risk because essentially, like if they, let's say they bust the price up to, like, let's say $100 a token. Well, what's going to happen is people are going to sell at $100 a token until the market price drives down to what the market actually accepts, and that's coming out of the market maker's pocket, right? So there's a risk that they're putting. That doesn't work with an auction when the prices only go up, and they just get more money.
That's
just to add here as well. So you have the primary event, which was the auction itself. And then there are the secondary events, which is how the companies originally tried to explain what had happened. And then from the original explanation, then pivoted and, kind of spoke against themselves. Okay, now this happened, to current day where, it's almost as if it never happened at all. So,
yeah,
that's a completely different part of the story, where if you're speaking about market making, we all know that this is happening. This is an active situation that is almost blatantly being covered up.
Yes, it's like, if you ask me, it's just sort of the evolution of it, right? Which is sad, but it's the reality. So I'm very cautious of the time, guys. But just one, I have many questions, but just one real one from me. What's the point of a Web3 domain? What's the point of buying a domain from Rarible?
Yeah, I mean, look, the point is, if you have a really confusing domain, like wallet address, you can have a validity address, have a reverse lookup to that, and then essentially have it almost as a digital identity, where you can essentially link, all your social media, whatever, to that.
So a DNS for a wallet address is what you're saying.
Essentially. So, and then ultimately you could also use that to resolve, websites if you wanted to. So it's like a domain that works for everything. So it's like a contextual domain. So you can put your if somebody's sending you Bitcoin, they can send you Bitcoin at that address, and it auto resolves. Ethereum, same thing. It will go to your Ethereum address. So it can automatically figure out where to send the funds for based off of the input, basically.
Okay, no, as far as sort of technical value, I can see that holding some weight, like down the line, although it would have to sort of come from multiple parties that own different parts of that DNS. So that's a sort of separate story. I think but it's good to see that there's actual value there.
Unstoppable Domains is $1 billion company. It's
yeah. As far as sort of PR goes, don't worry, I'm very, very well aware. I just I make it a point to not buy the news in this industry. Never buy the news. So I see the name around, I see a big number. Okay, sure, it's just some stupid PR budget selling me some stupid crap that doesn't make sense. So
but just imagine, right?
With people like yourselves, and that's how I'll decide whether there's merit or not. You know what I mean? But what's scary is that $1 billion name can get away with something this serious. Allegedly, because this is what we're discussing. Allegedly, I haven't seen any of the data. I haven't seen you guys are friends, but I'm going to sort of go off what you're saying, right? But that this can happen, and the market's none the wiser. Like, why aren't all of these auctions a fucking smart contract? It should be an obvious use case.
Non-negotiable, actually.
Non-negotiable. Like, why are we still trying to do Web3 with one foot in the door of Web2? It's like,
but you know, maybe that's by design.
But I'll hold it in my centralized wallet. Of course,
but
it's by design. Of course, it's by design, because it creates opportunity for abuse.
Exactly, right? So it's almost like it's like, hey, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna create like this jewelry store, right? We're the only guys who know that we didn't put a lock on it, right? And then we're gonna say, oh, we didn't have a camera there, but 3 other dudes came in, like emptied the jewelry store and walked off. Trust us, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. It was, I guess we were in charge of it. We made the freaking jewelry store. We put the jewels in there, your jewels, but we're not the guys that took it out. If somebody else, we don't have that on camera.
Jason, it's Quadriga CX all over again, and Cryptopia all over again. It's just another iteration, man. It's just another iteration. But thank you both so much for having the guts, as it were, to sort of speak about this so plainly and openly. I look forward to seeing how your sort of case.
The one thing I want to add again is, like, people really get confused, and I think Nadja will speak about this very briefly. People get confused and think this is about our auction. There's nothing to do with it, right? Like, it's not about what happened in my specific auction. The fact is, this is happening to retail investors every day, and they have no outlet. Like, nobody knows to talk to. Like, if you can imagine what you mentioned, I'm a Cointelegraph Innovation Circle member. And I can't get this in Cointelegraph.
Exactly.
Nadja has massive connections with guys who worked at Bitcoin.com who are ignoring messages, by the way.
And they won't touch it because everyone's eating. Everyone's eating. How it is.
Exactly. So can you imagine if we were retail investors? So this is why the reason we're passionate about this is because retail investors, if they weren't us, like, if this is so difficult for us to get out, imagine if you're a retail investor. Now just imagine how many times they're probably doing this in the past and got away with it because those guys weren't us.
And they can't even explain what their issue is either, right? Like, you guys are smart enough and articulate enough to be able to explain it. Retail investors
exactly, but the shocking thing is that multiple people have actually reached out to us, retail investors. They have been documenting irregularities over many months. So actually, they have been trying to speak out. They have tried to make their voices heard. But because they are anonymous, because they don't have names in the industry and a platform and a voice the way that we do, they've never been listened to. So the more that we put things out there, the more we find out that no, this is not the start of this whatsoever. There's multiple people who know that irregularities have been taking place over months and months and months.
And this is exactly what needs to happen in the industry in order for us to propel forward. There's a number of cancers in the industry. I won't mention any other names. That's a sort of a conversation for another time. But they do have to die. There's a lot of names, and they do have to die, and they cannot die without having difficult conversations like this one. Now, whether like what it will lead to, I don't know. But the fact that we're having this conversation in the first place is progress, right? So thank you so much for taking the time, guys. I wish you luck with the case and have a wonderful day. Wonderful day.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.